Jesus spoke firmly to storms, sickness, and demons, but the people standing before him were never the target of his rage. Notice that carefully. His authority could be absolute without becoming cruel. His words could be decisive without humiliating the sufferer. He confronted what oppressed the person, but he did not confuse the person with the oppression. We have often imagined that spiritual power must be heated by anger. We have mistaken loudness for authority, harshness for courage, and emotional agitation for faith. Yet noise does not create authority. Rage does not strengthen truth. A person may raise his voice because he possesses confidence, but he may also raise it because confidence is absent. Here is the hidden distinction. There is compassionate authority, and there is combative performance. Compassionate authority is love, confronting whatever diminishes, binds, frightens, or degrades another human being. It does not ignore destruction. It does not make peace with bondage. Compassion may speak firmly because love refuses to surrender the sufferer to what is destroying him. Its severity is directed toward the captivity. Its tenderness is directed toward the captive. Combative performance is different. It uses emotional force to display the speaker's strength, compel submission, or establish spiritual importance. It must be seen. It must prevail publicly. It may speak about freedom while making the suffering person feel smaller, guiltier, and more afraid. You see, both may sound forceful, but they do not come from the same source, and they cannot bear the same fruit. One serves the wounded, the other uses the wounded. One restores dignity, the other magnifies the performer. One leaves freedom behind, the other leaves fear. This is the interpretive key. Christlike authority separates the sufferer from the suffering. It sees the human being as the object of love and the oppression as the object of resistance. Firmness is not the problem. Hostility toward people is the problem. Therefore, whenever authority is exercised, test it. What is its motive? What is its target? What method does it use? What fruit remains when the moment has passed? If love governs it, the person's restoration will matter more than the speaker's reputation. Now let us go further. This distinction reveals two governing systems, two kinds of authority that may use similar words while expressing opposite purposes. There are two kinds of authority. One is restorative, the other is dominating. One is governed by love, the other is governed by self. Until you understand that distinction, you may mistake intensity for power and obedience for transformation. Restorative authority directs its strength toward freedom, dignity, wholeness, and peace. It does not ask first, how can I prove my position? It asks, how can this person be helped? Love is its governor, truth is its voice, service is its method, restoration is its aim. Dominating authority moves in another direction. It seeks control, recognition, fear, and visible victory. It wants the room to know who is in charge. It measures success by how quickly others submit, how completely questions disappear, and how impressive the speaker appears. The person becomes secondary, the display becomes central. Notice carefully, these two authorities may use identical words. Both may command, both may correct, both may speak of truth, order, faith, and obedience. Yet the same vocabulary can conceal opposite motives. A command may be firm and loving. It may also be religious and cruel. Words alone do not reveal the governing power. Purpose and fruit reveal it. Restorative authority does four things. It sees the person. It distinguishes the oppressor from the oppressed. It acts for the person's good. Then it releases that person without demanding applause, dependence, or lifelong tribute. Domination reverses every point. It reduces a person to a problem. It interprets weakness as guilt. It makes the minister, leader, or speaker the center of the moment. Then it leaves fear, shame, or dependence behind and calls that result submission. But compliance is not proof of Christ-like authority. A frightened person may comply. A shamed person may become silent. An exhausted person may surrender resistance. If authority claims to represent Christ, its conduct must agree with his character. Its method cannot deny the very love it professes to serve. So examine your own picture of spiritual strength. Do you instinctively see volume, anger, urgency, and control? Or do you see patience, courage, clarity, restraint, and sacrificial care? Which qualities make a person appear powerful? and which qualities actually enable that person to serve. You were not appointed to become an accuser of captives. You were called to become a servant of restoration. Your authority is not measured merely by the intensity of your speech, but by the inward government from which you speak and the fruit your words produce. Now, this distinction must become practical. We must identify precisely where forceful language belongs, because the suffering person is not its rightful target. The suffering person is not the rightful target. That is the first discipline of compassionate authority. Jesus could be unyielding toward a destructive condition and still remain tender toward the one caught beneath it. He did not need to despise the captive in order to oppose the captivity. This distinction is deeply important. You may name an affliction without condemning the afflicted. You may expose deception without treating the deceived person as worthless. You may confront a destructive pattern without stripping dignity from the one who has become entangled in it. Truth identifies the bondage. Love remembers the captive. Anger becomes dangerous when it crosses that boundary. It may begin as resistance to something harmful, yet gradually turn into pleasure in humiliating the person. The voice grows sharper. The language becomes personal. Correction becomes accusation. Soon, the speaker is no longer fighting for restoration, but fighting to win. Notice how this enters ordinary relationships. A parent may confront a harmful behavior without making the child believe he is a hopeless failure. A leader may correct error without reducing the mistaken person to that error. A friend may oppose a destructive choice without withdrawing all respect. A community may resist abuse without adopting the methods of the abuser. Compassion does not deny evil. It does not excuse wrongdoing. It does not eliminate consequences or remove necessary boundaries. Love is not moral weakness. Love can say no. Love can command an end. Love can withdraw access, protect the vulnerable, insist upon truth, and require responsible change. But love refuses to let opposition become hatred. You see, the boundary is not between firmness and kindness, as though one must cancel the other. The boundary is between restoration and destruction. Firmness, governed by love, protects what is precious. Firmness governed by hostility wounds the very person it claims to help. Ask yourself one searching question whenever your words become forceful. Am I trying to break the bondage, or am I trying to break the person? That question will uncover the hidden motive. If your aim is to punish vulnerability, establish superiority, or discharge your own anger, you have left the ground of compassionate authority. Here is the governing order. Truth identifies what is wrong. Compassion remembers who the person is. Authority serves the work of restoration. Keep that order, and courage remains clean. Abandon it, and even religious language can become an instrument of contempt. Now, when the person is no longer treated as the enemy, something changes in the entire approach to suffering. Compassion does not rush first to display its power. Compassion sees before it speaks. Compassion sees before it speaks. It is not a passing emotion, nor is it helpless sympathy that merely feels another person's pain. Compassion is love, awakened to a human need and moved toward responsible action. It notices, approaches, understands, and then acts. This is the movement we repeatedly find in the ministry of Jesus. The overlooked person becomes visible. The distressed are permitted to come near. The response is personal, not mechanical. Then, authority is directed toward relief. Jesus did not treat suffering people as interruptions in a more important program. Their need became the place where love expressed its purpose. Notice what attention accomplishes. Before a circumstance changes, attention begins restoring dignity. To be seen as a person, rather than a case, a burden, or a public illustration, is already a form of relief. The sufferer discovers that weakness has not erased worth. Performance and presence move in opposite directions. Performance looks first for observers. Presence looks first at the one who is hurting. Performance asks how the moment will appear. Compassion asks what the person truly needs. Performance turns vulnerability into a platform. Compassion creates room where vulnerability can be met without needless exposure. That is why compassionate authority listens. It does not force every sufferer into the same method, the same emotional display, or the same timetable. It pays attention to the actual need. One person may need a clear command. Another may first need to be heard. One may need correction, another encouragement. One may need immediate protection, another patient companionship. Love does not become less authoritative when it listens. Listening enables authority to act accurately. And notice the calmness of Jesus. Authority secure in its source does not require frenzy to persuade itself that it possesses power. It can be decisive without becoming agitated. It can remain present without turning the sufferer's crisis into the speaker's drama. Bring this into ordinary life. In the home, listening may be the first act of loving leadership. In a congregation, attention may rescue someone who has learned to hide pain behind acceptable words. In the workplace, a measured question may reveal what accusation would have concealed. In friendship, patient presence may accomplish what forceful advice cannot. The manner of ministry is already part of its message. You cannot restore dignity through needless degradation. You cannot teach peace by creating terror. You cannot reveal compassionate authority while treating people as objects. Compassion, then, is not vague sentiment. It is attentive love. It sees the person, honors dignity, listens for the need, and prepares to act. But compassion does not stop with seeing. What it recognizes, inwardly, presses outward toward restoration. Here is the next fact. Power is not complete merely because a dramatic moment has occurred. A command may have been spoken. Emotion may have filled the room. People may have watched in amazement. Yet the purpose of authority is not fulfilled until the suffering person is helped toward freedom and wholeness. Restoration has recognizable fruit. There is relief from oppression. There is recovery of dignity. There is a return to responsible participation in life. There is renewed peace within the person and, where possible, within relationships. These are not decorations added to authority. They are the ends for which authority was entrusted. Spectacle asks, was power displayed? Compassion asks, did love accomplish good? Spectacle remembers the minister's words. Compassion remembers the person's future. Spectacle reaches its climax when everyone is watching. Restoration continues after the crowd has gone. Notice that carefully. Compassion remains concerned after the forceful command. It does not create a dramatic encounter and then abandon the person to confusion, isolation, or shame. It stays near enough to ask what freedom now requires. Some people need patient welcome. Some need wise boundaries. Some need practical support, renewed trust, or time to learn new patterns. Freedom may begin in a moment, but participation often grows through faithful care. Love makes room for that growth. It does not demand an instant performance from someone who is learning to stand again. This is why another person's suffering must never become material for our self-exaltation. Vulnerability is not content. Testimony is not personal branding. A wounded life is not proof of our rank. When another person's pain becomes the platform upon which we build our importance, we have ceased to serve restoration. The principle reaches beyond visible ministry. Correction should make maturity possible. Leadership should make service possible. Discipline should make healthy order possible. Even a necessary boundary should protect what is good and open a truthful path forward. Authority governed by love enlarges the other person. Authority governed by self enlarges the speaker. So do not judge power merely by the volume of the command, the emotion of the moment, or the reaction of the crowd. Judge it by its fruit. Was oppression resisted? Was dignity preserved? Was responsible life strengthened? Was peace made more possible? Restoration is the proper evidence of love-governed authority because it serves another person's recovery rather than using that person to create a spectacle. And once we see this, we can recognize a troubling counterfeit. Aggression may resemble authority outwardly while being governed by an entirely different condition within. Aggression is deceptive because it can resemble confidence. Both may sound certain. Both may appear decisive. Both may refuse compromise. Yet their resemblance is outward. Their sources are opposite. Confidence rests in truth and delegated responsibility. It does not need to manufacture authority through emotional pressure. Aggression, however, often depends upon pressure to sustain the speaker's sense of power. It must push harder because inwardly it is afraid that its words cannot stand without force. Notice the counterfeit cycle. Inner fear produces overstatement. Overstatement demands immediate submission. Resistance then feels like personal rejection. The speaker escalates, not because truth requires it, but because status appears threatened. What began as an attempt to lead becomes a struggle to preserve an image. Pride turns ministry into self-defense. A disagreement is called disloyalty. A question is treated as rebellion. A request for accountability becomes an attack. Vulnerable people are no longer seen as those to be protected. They are seen as threats because their pain may expose the leader's limitations. Mature confidence bears different fruit. It can remain calm when challenged. It can receive correction without collapsing. It can admit what it does not know. It can change its method without surrendering truth. Most importantly, it can protect the weak even when doing so costs the speaker recognition or control. Aggression cannot easily do these things. It must dominate, exaggerate, shame, or intimidate. It confuses being questioned with being dishonored. It confuses fear in the listener with respect. It confuses silence with agreement. But fear is not honor, and silence is not transformation. Now let us bring the test inward. Do you become harsher when you feel unseen? Do you become louder when you feel challenged? Does embarrassment make you more severe? Does a sense of powerlessness create an urge to control someone else? These questions uncover the motive beneath the appearance. Emotional intensity is not automatically wrong. Compassion may feel deeply, courage may speak urgently, righteous concern may carry great force. But emotion must never become the source, the proof, or the master of spiritual authority. Love must govern it. Truth must direct it. Responsibility must restrain it. Before you exercise authority in any situation involving another person, bring your fear and pride under the government of love. Calm, accountable courage is stronger than emotional domination because it does not need to injure another person to feel secure. With the counterfeit exposed, we can now place authority where it belongs, not above service, not against service, but within service, as power entrusted for another person's good. Authority is an entrusted capacity to act within a responsibility. It is never personal ownership of another human being. The moment authority forgets that it is entrusted, it begins to treat privilege as possession and people as property. Here is the proper order. Love governs authority. Authority serves restoration, and the servant remains accountable for the way power is used. Remove love, and authority becomes cold. Remove restoration, and authority loses its purpose. Remove accountability, and authority becomes dangerous. The spiritual performer asks, "How can this power establish my rank?" The servant asks, "How can this entrusted power relieve, protect, guide, and restore?" One measures influence by the number of people who depend upon him. The other measures faithfulness by the number of people becoming freer, wiser, and stronger. Notice that greater authority does not create greater permission for self-indulgence. It creates greater responsibility for restraint, clarity, patience, and care. Why? Because the vulnerable bear the cost when authority is misused. The stronger voice can silence the weaker one. The honored leader can conceal the pain of the overlooked. The trusted guide can turn dependence into control. This becomes practical everywhere. In leadership, authority should create safety for truth, not fear of the leader. In parenting, it should form maturity, not merely produce outward compliance. In teaching, it should awaken understanding, not make questions dangerous. In correction, it should identify what must change while preserving the person's worth. In prayer, it should serve the sufferer rather than display the one praying. In conflict, it should make justice and peace possible rather than guarantee one person's victory. Service is not weakness. Service is strength, accepting responsibility for another's good. Love may confront danger decisively. It may interrupt harm, establish boundaries, and refuse manipulation. The servant acts firmly because someone must be protected, not because someone must be dominated. There are also limits that spiritual language must never erase. No one receives authority to invade another person's privacy, override conscience, demand unhealthy dependence, or escape examination. Where consent is appropriate, it should be honored. Where boundaries are necessary, they should be clear. Authority that cannot endure accountability is already confessing the weakness of its foundation. The servant is satisfied when the person becomes steadier, wiser, freer, and less dependent upon the servant's importance. That is success. That is stewardship. That is power fulfilling its purpose. If you represent Christ, your strength is not permission to magnify yourself. It is equipment for loving service. Authority belongs beneath responsibility. and responsibility belongs beneath love. Yet even service requires an unchanging safeguard, for noble language can still conceal selfish motives. That safeguard is the government of love. Love is the test, and love is the boundary. No claim of revelation, gifting, office, urgency, or spiritual power places a person above the obligation to love. Authority does not suspend love. Authority is legitimate only while love governs it. What do we mean by love? Love seeks another person's true good without falsehood, exploitation, humiliation, coercion, or self-exaltation. It does not flatter what is destructive, but neither does it destroy dignity in the name of truth. Love is not the enemy of firmness. It is the governor that keeps firmness from becoming cruelty. Here are 5 questions by which forceful speech must be examined. Is it true? Is the person's good the aim? Is the response proportionate to the situation? Is dignity being protected? Can the speaker remain accountable for both the words and their consequences? Do not pass over these questions quickly. A forceful statement may be accurate in part and still be used dishonestly. A necessary correction may become excessive. A claim to care may conceal the desire to control. If authority repeatedly fails these tests, it should be restrained, corrected, or refused, regardless of how impressive its language sounds. Notice the disguises domination wears. A threat may call itself prophecy. Shame may call itself correction. Control may call itself covering. Rage may call itself zeal. Manufactured dependence may call itself discipleship. But a sacred label cannot sanctify a destructive method. If the fruit is fear, humiliation, silence, and unhealthy dependence, the name does not change the nature. Yet love does more than restrain authority. Love authorizes courageous protection. It confronts harmful conduct. It establishes consequences. It refuses access when safety requires it. It defends the vulnerable and tells the truth plainly. Love does not preserve peace by sacrificing people to someone else's unchecked behavior. Accountability, therefore, strengthens true authority. The person governed by love can welcome examination, receive correction, and explain a decision without demanding immunity. Why? Because the mission matters more than personal image. Restoration matters more than rank. Now the entire model stands before us. Compassion supplies the motive. Truth identifies the problem. Authority acts. Wisdom determines the manner. Restoration defines the desired fruit. Love governs every part and sets the boundary none may cross. This safeguard preserves courage while rejecting coercion. It permits firmness without cruelty, correction without shame, protection without domination, and leadership without self-exaltation. The governing principle is now clear, but a principle becomes powerful only when it becomes practice. We must turn this government of love into a daily discipline of speech, action, and self-government. The practice begins within. Before you speak forcefully, pause and ask, what is governing you? Is it love? Is it fear? Is it irritation, pride, embarrassment, or the desire to be seen as powerful? The outward act will eventually reveal the inward governor. Here is a pattern you can practice. See the person, distinguish the problem, clarify your responsibility, choose a proportionate action, preserve dignity, then remain present for the outcome. Do not omit one step and imagine that intensity will compensate for the loss. In prayer, direct firmness toward the oppression, not against the person receiving care. Let your words communicate hope and dignity. The sufferer should not leave feeling that weakness made him contemptible or that your performance became the center of his pain. In correction, name the behavior clearly, explain its consequence, establish whatever boundary is necessary, then open a responsible path toward repair. Correction that provides no path forward easily becomes punishment for its own sake. Love tells the truth, but love also shows what faithfulness now requires. In leadership, replace public humiliation with direct communication. Replace dependence upon your personality with growth toward maturity. Replace tests of personal loyalty with shared accountability to truth and responsibility. A healthy leader does not need people to remain small in order to feel great. In conflict, refuse contempt. Listen for the wound beneath the reaction. Speak truth without exaggeration. Seek a just resolution, not a theatrical victory. You may need to be firm, but firmness does not require you to misrepresent the other person or make reconciliation impossible. Practice these things in small encounters. Habits formed in ordinary irritation will govern you in moments of greater pressure. If you practice contempt when inconvenienced, contempt will answer when you are challenged. If you practice patience, clarity, and restraint in daily life, those servants will be ready when the stakes rise. Now review a recent use of authority. What was your motive? What was your target? What manner did you use? What fruit remained? Are you willing to repair any harm your conduct caused? Where aggression has wounded another person, do not hide behind good intentions. Acknowledge the misuse without excuse. Restore the dignity you diminished. Accept appropriate limits. Then demonstrate change through consistent conduct. Restitution is not loss of authority. It is authority returning to the government of truth and love. This pattern makes compassionate authority practical. See, distinguish, clarify, act proportionately, preserve dignity, and remain for restoration. Practice it until calm courage becomes your habit. Daily practice now prepares the final decision to accept the identity of a restorative servant and carry this way of exercising strength into the wider community. Come back to the beginning. Jesus spoke firmly to destruction, but the suffering person remained the object of compassion. His authority did not need human humiliation as evidence of divine strength. It resisted what bound people and moved toward their restoration. Now the whole chain is clear. The person is not the enemy. Compassion sees the person. Truth distinguishes the problem. Authority serves the work of freedom. Wisdom governs the manner. Love sets the boundary. Restoration is the fruit. Reject, then, the false identity of the spiritual performer. You do not need to appear powerful in every moment, win every encounter, answer every challenge, or silence every question. That identity will make you defend your image when you should be serving another person's good. It will turn correction into combat and responsibility into rank. Accept the identity of the restorative servant. Be secure enough to remain calm. Be courageous enough to confront evil. Be humble enough to receive correction. Be loving enough to remain with the wounded after the dramatic moment has passed. This is not a lesser authority. It is authority cleansed of self-exaltation and restored to its proper purpose. Examine this framework carefully against the character and conduct of Jesus. Do not accept an inherited habit merely because it sounds forceful, feels familiar, or carries religious language. Test its motive, test its target, test its method, test its fruit. Then practice intentionally. Govern your speech by love, direct firmness accurately, protect dignity, remain accountable. Measure success by the genuine good accomplished in another person, not by the impression you create. Practice this in prayer, correction, leadership, conflict, and every ordinary relationship where your words carry weight. Consider what could happen if this became the governing pattern of our homes, congregations, and communities. Parents could correct without crushing. Leaders could protect without controlling. Teachers could guide without humiliating. Communities could confront harmful conduct without becoming hateful. Authority could make the vulnerable safer, the wounded visible, and the immature capable of growth. You have not been called to imitate the violence of what you oppose. You have been called to confront destruction without becoming destructive, to speak truth without contempt, and to use strength for restoration. Compassion does not weaken authority. Compassion purifies its motive. Compassion defines its boundary. Compassion reveals whom power is truly meant to serve. So carry this mandate with you. Let every command, every correction, every boundary, every act of leadership, and every exercise of spiritual power pass through the government of love.